You know, I have to ask myself, why did one decade give us 5 to 8 classics a year, while another decade barely gave us 5 movies worth watching over the course of 10 years? Hi y'all, SnarkyJay cosplay here. So a few months back, I made a video where I did basically 25 movies, one for every year I've been alive, but I had to do only movies from the time that I've been alive, so from 2000 to 2025, which means that 90% of my favorite movies of all time, which were made before 1999, all got left in the past. But when I've looked at movie lists, and I looked at all the movies that I didn't get to add, I realized that a big portion of my favorite movies of all time all came from one decade, the 90s. The 90s were somehow probably the greatest decade in the history of movie making. Essentially, 6 forces made the 90s special, and 4 shifts in the 2000s broke the spell. Before we do that, give me a minute or two to rapid fire a bunch of the classics released in every year of the 90s. I'm gonna do this really quick. You ready? In 1990, we got Goodfellas, Misery. In 1991, Silence of the Lambs, Cape Fear, Beauty and the Beast, Thelma and Louise, Fried Green Tomatoes. 1992, Reservoir Dogs, Dracula, Basic Instinct, Unforgiven, Scent of a Woman, Batman Returns. In 1993, we got Schindler's List, Jurassic Park, Tombstone, True Romance, The Nightmare Before Christmas, Groundhog Day, Mrs. Doubtfire, Carlito's Way, Indecent Proposal. In 1994, we got The Shawshank Redemption, Pulp Fiction, The Usual Suspects, Forrest Gump, Leon the Professional, The Lion King, Interview with the Vampire, and my personal favorite, The Crow. 1995 gave us Seven, Heat, Toy Story, Braveheart, Casino, Copycat, Jumanji, Dolores Claiborne, and Tommy Boy. 1996 gave us Primal Fear, Independence Day, Fargo, Sleepers, A Time to Kill, Matilda, The Birdcage, The Hunchback of Notre Dame. 1997 brought us Good Will Hunting, Titanic, The Fifth Element, Life is Beautiful, The Devil's Advocate, Hercules, and Jackie Brown. 1998 delivered The Negotiator, Saving Private Ryan, The Truman Show, The Big Lebowski, Meet Joe Black, Blade, There's Something About Mary, The Prince of Egypt, Mulan, and A Bug's Life. And rounding out the decade, in 1999, we got a killer streak with Fight Club, The Matrix, The Green Mile, The Sixth Sense, 10 Things I Hate About You, American Beauty, The Mummy, Toy Story 2, and The Iron Giant. That is a lot of phenomenal films, and notice the quality and the variety of different kinds of films. You've got great kids content, action, drama, mystery, thrillers. There are so many phenomenal films that all came out during the 90s, an era that we'll likely never see again. Reason number 1, we basically got a spec and indie boom, which gave us a flood of original movies. Studios in the 90s were actively competing for original, risky scripts. The film Basic Instinct actually broke records back then. The spec sold for $3 million. And for folks that are unfamiliar with what a spec is, a spec script, otherwise known as a speculative screenplay, is a non-commissioned and unsolicited screenplay. It's usually written by a screenwriter who then pitches it to studios and tries to sell it, but basically nobody asked for this to be written. It was just their idea. And in the 90s, there were so many phenomenal specs being written, and not only were they being written, but they were being actively sought after and bid on and purchased by major studios with a vested interest in making original films. Back then, the money chased new ideas, not IPs and guaranteed successful franchises. And in the era where Miramax was at its peak along with Sundance, a lot of films that were festival darlings like Reservoir Dogs and Clerks basically got to become mainstream hits because the studios were behind them. Indie basically became a market, which opened the doors for people like Tarantino to walk into the mainstream and become mainstays. The second reason the 90s rocked for film is because it was essentially the mid-budget golden age.
We'll get into that in just a minute. First, here's a word from this video's sponsor.
This is my best buddy Torgal, and a little over a month ago we decided to make the switch from feeding him kibble to giving him fresh food from the farmer's dog. I want the best for my little guy, and after seeing how disinterested he was in his kibble, plus finding out how overly processed it all is, I decided to make the switch. Founded on the principles that dogs deserve to eat the very best in their food and backed by decades of pet nutrition research, the farmer's dog delivers fresh, human-grade food that's nutritionally balanced straight to my door. I'm already seeing a difference. His fur is softer and shinier, his potty breaks are a lot more regular and normal, and best of all, I don't have to convince him to eat. He just scarfs it down every time. When I signed up, they asked me all kinds of questions about him and his breed and his activity level, all to put together a perfectly balanced meal plan that makes sense for him. And they offer great personalized service and 24/7 customer support, meaning you always have a partner in feeding your little pal. I could talk about them all day long, but the proof is in the bowl. He absolutely loves his food from the farmer's dog. Get 50% off your first box of freshly made, healthy dog food. Take advantage of this great promo, plus free shipping and 24/7 customer support. Click the link in the description or scan the QR code to get started. I made a video a few weeks ago about how comedy movies have suffered a huge hit because nobody's really making mid-budget films anymore. That's what the 90s were about, mid-budget films. Studios routinely greenlit movies with budgets of $15 million to $60 million, and they could be dramas, comedies, thrillers, what have you. And that basically paved the way for films like Heat, Seven, Devil's Advocate, The Truman Show, and that was all before the spec market essentially shrunk, like it did dramatically by the time we hit 2010, which basically went to show us that studios were already moving away from making original projects, especially in throwing any money at them at all. The third reason, and this is a big one, and it's probably one of the more important ones because I think it's why we're never gonna see an era like the 90s. Back then, economics rewarded variety. And a big part of that is because there was still an aftermarket for films once they were gone from the box office when it came to VHS and DVDs. That little home video window, it was the latest years of VHS tapes, and basically we got DVDs right after it. But that home video market really made it so that films that weren't huge at the box office made up a lot of money in a big way after they were out and available for people to bring home. And that essentially encouraged the studios and the market to put out a variety of different movies. They knew that comedies and thrillers and more low-level, lower mid-budget stuff could still make a ton of money. And therefore they were encouraged to put out a variety of different things because people wanted to see a variety of different things at home. And then of course the 90s was a really great sweet spot for tech. It was basically a marriage of practical magic combined with early CGI. Jurassic Park probably proves it best. Animatronics and practical effects mixed with some digital effects still holds up perfectly to this day. Audiences watching the first Jurassic Park and the later films in the franchise basically got to experience really well-crafted creatures interacting with humans for the first time. And so the result were bold concepts that looked super real, but they still emphasized story, character, and they were willing to provide a lot of fantasy because now they had more technology to kind of back it up. Sound also got a huge leap in the 90s with DTS and advancements in surround sound, which meant the theatrical experience got even better, and people were more and more willing to go into the theaters to really get not just the big screen experience, but also the big sound experience. Reason number 5 is a big one. Stay with me here. The 90s were an era of the animation renaissance, aka really f***ing good kids content. The era gave us the Disney Renaissance, which is basically considered from 1989 but ended in 1999. Throughout that period, we got Beauty and the Beast, Hercules, The Lion King, The Hunchback of Notre Dame, Toy Story. And speaking of Toy Story, that was the first fully CGI feature that launched Pixar's incredible run. And DreamWorks enters the mix of revolutionary kids content with one of the greatest animated films I've ever seen, The Prince of Egypt. It's beautiful animation, phenomenal music. It is such a great film and does a really neat job of telling that story. But think about that, how incredibly balanced a list of films in the 90s can be when there's so much family-friendly content that isn't just stupid, oh, it's made for kids bullshit. It was actually good and has stood the test of time. Family films back then were ambitious and writerly and good. And the last note is that we kind of entered an era where people were kind of allowing themselves to make some more stylistic choices, to get a little artsier, to get creative with familiar genres. There were so many screens available for films in the 90s. And so they gave way to this big gasp of star-driven and director-driven green lights that produced some of the greatest films, at least in the 90s, maybe even ever made. It made room for movies like Heat. Think about how amazing Heat is. It's a film that they have tried to imitate in Hollywood for years. Even Captain America the Winter Soldier tries to imitate that bank heist scene. And it's a movie that puts two legendary actors, Al Pacino and Robert De Niro, not just against each other, but in the same room in a diner over a cup of coffee. Phenomenal storytelling. We also get movies like The Matrix, which are absolutely incredible, not just in concept, but in the effects, and their effects on pop culture have stood the test of time. We get cult classics like The Big Lebowski, which gave us not only phenomenal soundtracks and great performances from people like John Turturro, Jeff Bridges, John Goodman, and Steve Buscemi, but also just a lot of references that we still make to this day. Films like Unforgiven, probably one of the greatest westerns ever made and is one of my favorite movies of all time. And it also gives way to films like my actual favorite movie of all time, The Crow, by a director, Alex Proyas, who tried so hard to insert his own style. It's a really stylized movie, and I think things like that got made in the 90s because the culture allowed for it. And so those are a lot of reasons why the 90s just worked when it came to films, but I feel like there's almost just as many reasons why the 2000s couldn't replicate that. For one, we've now encountered the IP and franchise gravity well, where we're all just being sucked in against our will. Studios reoriented themselves towards pre-sold IPs like Harry Potter, the X-Men, any other Marvel group, and then spent the back half of the decade doubling down on these franchises. I want you to think about this number. I'm going to tell you the share of the box office going towards sequels. In the 90s, the number of the box office that was going to sequels was only about 11.7%. And from 2014 to about 2023, that number balloons to a whopping 41.7%. And that number starts growing right in the 2000s. And speaking of money, we already know that from the 90s to the 2000s, economics totally flipped. In the early 2000s, the DVD gold rush really peaked, and then it totally crashed. And without that little cushion of that post-box office, post-theater run, rental, home video, whatever situation, mid-budget originals got squeezed out in favor of sure things that were gonna make a ton of money. Globalization didn't help either. The rising dependence of Hollywood looking to make money on the international grosses meant that the studios started to favor things that were VFX heavy and favored brand recognition so that they could make more money on a globally inoffensive and recognizable sense as opposed to more quirky regional specific films. And then worst of all, the pipeline for fresh voices basically dried up. With spec sales falling and festival titles way less likely to go wide release, the next Tarantino-style breakout star became rarer and now kind of obsolete, which pushed a lot of adult dramas towards prestige TV and streaming services as opposed to ever seeing their films or projects hit the big screen. And look, the 2000s did deliver some undeniable classics. An original film like No Country for Old Men did really well in the 2000s, and we got to enjoy that. There's also, of course, great franchises in the 2000s. We're not just talking about Marvel brain rot, but the entirety of Lord of the Rings, which is a well-loved, well-respected franchise that basically got made and released during the 2000s, and it's loved and has a huge place in pop culture to this day. I'm not saying the 2000s are some sort of cultural wasteland that we're all just having to dredge through, but what I am saying is that there are way fewer original films in the 2000s, and a lot of the releases that happened during the 2000s and have continued now into 2025 are adaptations, or re-releases, or remakes, or legacy sequels, or even worse, these multi-billion-dollar bloated, overgrown, overhyped franchises that we just can't seem to escape from. Folks, I don't really know what the purpose of this video was. Was it to lament the state of Hollywood and film as it stands right now, as we've been living in from the 2000s now to 2025? Reminder, I was born in 2000, so unfortunately, everything that's come out since I was born has been totally bleh compared to the things that I was exposed to, and I thank God that I have the parents that I have. My dad is a huge movie lover. I grew up in his living space, seeing on his walls posters for Reservoir Dogs, Goodfellas, Pulp Fiction, and my mom, especially over the past few years, has taken it upon herself to every time we're trying to decide on a movie, she'll sit there and scroll for a little while, and she'll go, have you seen this? And she'll pull out some from the 80s or 90s that I've never seen, never heard of, and 9 times out of 10 it's an absolute banger. So I've been exposed to a lot of really phenomenal films because both my parents really love movies, but I honestly feel so bad for people in the 2000s now that are not being exposed to anything but this franchise we're getting now. So again, was the entire purpose of this video just to talk about the 2000s? It actually wasn't. I really want us to think about how fantastic the 90s were, and I hope that now we basically have an understanding of why the 90s were so great for movies, because I've been thinking about that for a while, especially when I remembered all the fantastic movies that came out in like 94 and 95. But what I also hope this video has done for some people is maybe encourage you to look on the IMDb list of everything that's come out in the 90s and go rewatch something. Go watch something that you've never seen, go watch something you haven't seen in 30-something years, and go enjoy films as they used to be, when they really felt like films, when the lighting was good, when the dialogue was good, and everything was made with love, and there isn't some greater universe to understand. Go fall in love with films again. I literally just rewatched Heat 2 days ago, and that's why this entire video came to mind, and that's why I sat here and worked on this for a few hours, because I watched Heat and it reminded me of all the things that I love about well-made movies. So do yourself a favor, go enjoy some good films from the 90s, and later make a rant about it. Talk shit about the 2000s all you want, but go make yourself something delicious, sit down, watch a good movie. Come back, tell me what you saw. And that's all from me. I've been SnarkyJay. Thank you so much for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe. For more SnarkyJay, be sure to check me out on Instagram. And if you'd like to support me, this channel, and my content creation, do check out and consider subscribing to my Patreon for exclusive photo shoot sets and cosplay content. I'll add links to all of those in the description below. And let me know your top 5 movies from the 1990s in the comments below.